Hey everyone, it's Paula MacLean, and I'm back with video number 3 in our 3-video series. And we've talked about what's operational and what's governance. We've talked about the deal breakers and some of the bad stuff that can happen and how to prevent those things. And in this third and final video, we're going to talk about how does a board both trust the executive director to do her or his job, as well as verify that that is actually happening. Now, one of the challenges is if we're going to be a policy board, we have to do the verifying part without getting our fingers into the operations of the organization. So I'm going to walk you through a set of strategies that will help you verify that you are on solid ground in the work that you are doing as a board because your executive director is on solid ground in her or his job. The first one, we've touched on this in the other 2 videos, which might be a hint about how important this is to do a 360-degree performance appraisal. The process to guide that has to be in writing, and you need to follow it every year or at a frequency set in board policy. Normally, anyone who is in the ED role who's been inside the organization for less than 5 years, regardless of the quality of their performance, gets an annual performance appraisal. From 5 years on, it's typical that we would do that process once every 2 years or sometimes even once every 3 years. So you want to set a board governance policy that says this is how often in these circumstances. You can drop back to once every year at any time that you want, and in fact some executive directors really love the annual process. So I know one executive director who's been in her job probably almost 20 years, and she still likes the annual performance appraisal, and her board is so efficient and has done it so many times now that it really doesn't feel like a whole lot of extra work. Okay, so second way of verifying is to do employee surveys. Boards should have a policy that says management must conduct employee surveys on a regular basis. Once every year, 2 years, or 3 years is usually acceptable. We need to create a survey that's not just a homemade kind of made up kind of version. So do some reading online, do some research with your sister agencies and sister nonprofits in your community, and ask some questions about how do they do the survey and what do they include, what kinds of questions do they ask. If you're a larger, relatively complex organization, it is very customary to have the survey farmed out, if you will, to people like me, many other of us that go to do that, to have it professionally done. The biggest issue with employee surveys, frankly, other than the questions that we ask and making sure they're rightly written and the rating scales are correct, the biggest issue is really anonymity and the confidentiality of that. Please don't use the old handwritten surveys because you'll get a very poor return rate from those, mostly because people say, everybody knows my handwriting, so when it goes forward to somebody in management, I know that they know who has written these comments. Those results from the survey are summarized and sent forward to the board together with an action plan that tells the board in these areas where perhaps we're not really excellent, where our performance is a little bit below what we had hoped, these are the actions that we will take. So this is a governance practice that's very important, and it's a very good management practice as well. The third area for verifying is evaluations and user surveys. So external evaluations, internal evaluations, bringing people in from other organizations to take a look at some of your services or programs or the things that you do with your participants or users. And then secondly, we want to engage our users in a regular survey as well. And again, think about the frequency of this. Many of us are feeling like we're kind of surveyed to death. So once a year at the most, once every 2 years probably enough. Once every 3 years, I wouldn't do it less often than that. The results of the survey, and again, an action plan for any areas that we're falling short or might need some improvement, go to the board of directors as soon as the survey results are summarized. Verify number 4 is the reporting by the executive director to the board. So regular executive director reports are really important, and usually at every board meeting. Now, you might meet monthly and quarterly reports might be sufficient, so have a conversation about what that is. Usually the board does not need more paper and the executive director does not need more work. So think about what the frequency should be and have a conversation with each other about that. Reports are usually made in writing and sometimes the executive director just includes it in the board package for information, and sometimes she or he actually makes a verbal report from that written report at a board meeting. The board should discuss and give direction to the executive director on what should be included in that report. So don't just leave it to the executive director's guesswork. And I get a fair number of questions and emails from executive directors saying, Paula, do you have a format for what board reports are supposed to include? And the answer is no. I don't typically like formats anyway. Every organization is different. The way you resolve this is to put it on the board agenda, and when you say, what would you like to see in my board reports, or what kind of reporting would you like to see from me, very often you will see board members have that stunned kind of deer stuck in the headlights view. It's like, we never thought about it and we're not unhappy with what you're already doing. But it's still an important conversation. So if people start staring at their shoelaces, just let the silence be and then say, it's important to me that I give you information that is what you need rather than what I think you need. So what are some of the things that you like in the current report that I'm giving you? What are some of the things that I could tweak or add? What are some of the things that could just drop off and you wouldn't mind not reading about it? We have to be careful in those board reports that we don't inadvertently lead the board into operations. It is an operational report to some degree, but we should not be reporting on the minor kinds of events inside the organization. If the roof fell in, you probably don't need to tell anybody because they've already heard it, right? The repair and maintenance strategy to monitor the organization's physical facilities might be something that the lesson that was learned from the fact that your roof caved in. Nobody was injured, by the way, in the cave-in. So if we had a roof caving in, we don't need to report on it. But the other part of it is that if we need a special motion to authorize some money to pay for that, if we need a grant written to authorize the money to pay for the new roof or the repairs, that might have to go into the board. And the board might ask a question, how did the roof fall in and we didn't know that the roof was in bad shape? So the report should include things that are relevant to the board to say, we learned something from this disaster, and here's how we're going to prevent it going forward. That's what should go into the board report. And then, so we want to make sure that we are focused on the board-related activities, the outcomes, the results, the benefit. We're going to report on strategic goals. Please do not lead your board members, if you're an ED, into the world of operations by giving them too much detail in your board reports. Verify number 5 is financial oversight. This is one that we tend to do reasonably well, and yet sometimes we can tweak it and up our game a little bit. For one thing that we can do is make sure that all board members, new and long-term, get training on how to read financial statements. The vast majority of board members do not have a finance background, and so your treasurer or your finance manager or even your external auditor should be a participant in getting them some training around, here's what you're looking at when you're looking at the statement of income and expense. This is what a balance sheet is. This is how you read the variance reporting. Regular presentation of those financial reports. Now, we are leaning towards less frequent. If your organization is financially stable, providing financial reports probably on a quarterly basis is fine. However, for organizations that are smaller, who really are tight for funds, who perhaps have a deficit projected in their budgets, or who have sizable cost overruns at certain points in time in the year, some additional board vigilance and oversight is really important. So monthly is still probably most frequent. Quarterly is next. So we want to make sure that we present that information. Your board reports on your statement of income and expense should include variance reporting. And of course, by that we mean a comparison between where we are at now and what our budget is and where we're at now this year compared to last year. So variance reporting is very important in terms of financial oversight. Then of course we have our annual external financial audits that are overseen usually by the treasurer, the finance committee, audit committee, and very often the lead finance person who is a paid staff member in the organization. And And finally, we want to make sure that the board reviews the auditor's management letter, usually in camera sessions. So the auditor is going to give you an opinion about certain things and how they're being managed from a financial perspective. And that letter should come to the treasurer of the board, not to the executive director. Certainly should be shared with the executive director, and the whole board should see the letter and have a conversation with each other and with the auditor about areas for improvement, things that we can do better that will ensure that our financial stewardship is sound. Number 6 is budget review. So budgets should not just be presented and approved. We should have a mind down by the treasurer of the board into what is in the budget. Chances are the treasurer didn't prepare the budget. Executive director, finance manager typically prepare the annual operating budgets, but the treasurer should know what's in there and should present it to the board, and the treasurer, finance person, and executive director should answer questions. So it's important that the board understand what's contained in the budget. Is also important to educate the board on what kinds of questions to ask. This will take some time and some training, but it's not rocket science. Numbers are just numbers, and every board member will have a different facility with numbers, but it's really important that board members understand that it's their responsibility and their right to ask questions about the operating budget before it's approved. Now, one of the most frequently asked questions that I want to answer here is that after that, as long as the expenditures are within budget, then in fact there is no additional approval required. So if a staffing pattern changes, if you hire somebody that's above the normal mid-range of a pay scale, if you change your benefit package, you do not need to go back to the board for additional approval on any of those things unless there is a requirement that the board has passed an motion that any variance from the budget requires special approval, or unless the money that you need to expend is above what is in the operating budget for that budget line. So very important that we understand when we approve the budget, we are not requiring the executive director, for the most case, to go back to the board and keep asking for approval for small things that are within budget. The next one is accreditation. Most organizations in the not-for-profit world are now accredited by someone, somehow. Some smaller organizations don't need accreditation, and that's perfectly fine. But once every 3 years, the site surveyors from your accreditation organization from outside will come in and look at the standards and measure your compliance with those standards. This is an anxiety-provoking time for most everybody inside organizations, and yet the chief benefit is actually not the certificate that you can put up on the wall that says we have another 3 years of accreditation. The biggest benefit is that we have to get ready and we have to improve our practices in order to meet the standards. Now, this should be a 3-year preparation process. Unfortunately, the timing of these things tend to sneak up on us, and we end up doing this really big ramp up in the last few months right before the site surveyors from the accrediting body arrive. And again, the results of the survey should be shared in I'm talking about the accreditation survey now. The results of the accreditation survey should be shared with the board together with an action plan that specifies what are the things that we're going to do to improve in the areas where perhaps we fell below or weren't quite up to the standards or expectations set by the accrediting body. The final one on our list is that we need to verify the progress towards our strategic goals. So first of all, we need a strategic planning process every 3 to 5 years. Then next, we should be having an annual, usually a board senior management retreat, where we evaluate our progress and take each one of those strategic goals and say these are where we're at in making those goals a reality. We need to make sure that we, on a monthly or regular board meeting basis, update from either committee chairs or from the executive director or both, that we update the progress towards those strategic goals. The last thing you want to do is to do this big strategic planning process, take the document and put it on a high shelf and forget entirely about it. So when we require ourselves to be doing regular reporting, we tend to then manage fairly actively to making those goals happening. It's not a case of that we'll forget about them for 3 years and then we'll finally ramp things up. And sometimes after 3 years, the goals aren't even relevant. Peter Drucker, the management guru, is famous for having said, that which gets measured gets done. And one of the ways we measure is by making sure we report on things that we have committed to. Now, I want to give you one more thing here that's about board governance. There is a tendency towards creating strategic plans and letting staff and management do all the work. And that's not a strategic plan. It's an operational plan. It would be much better if we just did the operational plan and save ourselves the time and money that it took to do the strategic plan. So if we have a truly strategic plan that takes goals that are spread over 3 to 5 years, board member involvement in accomplishing those goals is absolutely critical. So make sure that board members lead committees, participate in committees, are part of the reporting process, and that there is board engagement in the strategic planning process and in the accomplishment of those goals. If your board is passive in this, your board is weak, and it's really not a good idea to have a weak board. We are creating boards, and that's why I teach the Great Boards video course. We are creating boards that are the foundation builders on which the organization and its work and its services sit. And if the foundation is weak, things at the other levels of services and programs will begin to crack, and they will show that they are not sitting on something called a good, strong foundation from the board. So that's the end of our third and final video, Trust But Verify. And finally, just a reminder, I welcome your comments and questions. So send me a note to Paula MacLean at learningforleaders.ca. I read every email, I respond to every email, and I do that personally, so I really welcome the conversation and the dialogue. Remember that we have an awesome Facebook page for board members and executive directors, and you'll see the Facebook page URL at the bottom of this slide. So we're a wrap. Thanks so much for being here for the last 3 videos. Please continue to share this information, and all the best in your path to becoming a great board. Bye for now.